Hey guys, did you know that for most people, the earliest signs of heart disease start to appear in your teenage years? Also, due to the cumulative nature of heart disease, the single biggest risk factor is age. One of the biggest modifiable risk factors, meaning you can do something about it, is your LDL cholesterol. In this video, I explain why you should care about it now, whatever your age, and my personal journey from very average levels to those of the top 5% of the population. 4 years ago, I joined a company that offered their staff free at-home blood testing, and it was during the first of 19 lipid blood tests that I got my baseline LDL cholesterol. This was measured at a peak of 3 millimoles per litre in US units, 116 milligrams per deciliter. While this isn't dangerously high, I consider myself to have a relatively good diet with very regular exercise. However, I'd be lying if I said I was surprised by this result. Truthfully, it didn't even register to me that cholesterol is something I should pay any attention to in my 20s or 30s. Over the next few years, I became a regular listener of health podcasts, including Dr. Rhonda Patrick, and it was while listening to episodes related to blood markers that I learned of the significance of LDL cholesterol and later markers like ApoB. The moment of realization came when they quoted a 1980s research project that looked at around 3,000 15 to 34-year-olds. These were people who mainly died due to traumas such as road traffic accidents rather than anything heart-related. They found that the majority of teenagers had evidence of fatty streaks in their arteries. These fatty streaks go on to develop into lesions or plaques, which were seen in some individuals before the age of 20 and continue to develop through their 20s and early 30s. In fact, around 1 in 10 of these cases were considered to have advanced atherosclerosis. What this means is that the narrowing of arteries that might kill us in our 60s or 70s is happening right now, and it's potentially being accelerated by certain lifestyle behaviours. So what behaviours are driving these fatty streaks to develop in the first place? While smoking, obesity, diabetes and high blood pressure can increase the severity once plaques are developed, the primary driver of these fatty deposits is high non-HDL cholesterol, a major part of which is LDL cholesterol. So how did I manage to almost halve my cholesterol over the following 4 years, and what lifestyle changes made the difference? The answer, for me at least, was purely due to changes to my diet. Strangely enough, I'd only discovered the 2 key nutrients halfway through 2025, and up until then I'd managed to lower my cholesterol without knowing exactly what I was doing. In particular, a change to my breakfast in the second half of 2023 led to my biggest drop to date, and it's probably not what you think. In fact, oatmeal was the food I replaced. In September of that year, I read a book called Built to Move. In the back, it had a 21-day challenge, and one of the goals of that challenge was to eat 800 grams of fruits and vegetables every day. Crucially, I was allowed to include beans and legumes in that total. So as a way to ensure I ate them every day, I replaced my morning bowl of oatmeal with one of the bean or legume recipes I found online, which included a spiced lentil dish and chickpea fritters. The real epiphany came in 2025 while reading How Not to Age by Dr. Michael Greger. He kept mentioning the importance of lowering saturated fat and increasing fibre for heart health, and that's when it dawned on me that increasing fibre was exactly what I was doing by having beans or legumes every day. I then realised I had the perfect data set to explore this relationship. For the last 7 years, I've been logging every single meal I ate, and when I combined that with the results of the 19 blood tests, it gave me an incredibly clear view of what matters for lowering cholesterol. Having the raw numbers really helps here because despite a bowl of oatmeal containing 10 grams of fibre, which is excellent, my lentil dish contains 18 grams and the chickpea fritters contain an incredible 24 grams. If you look at my average fibre intake during that time, there was a jump of around 10 grams per day from making that change. The other nutrient mentioned by Dr. Greger is saturated fat. This is a fat that's solid at room temperature and it's in a lot of animal products like full-fat dairy and fattier cuts of meat. By replacing my morning oatmeal with legumes, I'd also inadvertently removed the glass of whole milk I used to make my oats, which contains almost 6 grams of saturated fat. And this can be seen in the dip to my average saturated fat intake halfway through 2023. My background as a data analyst helped me to analyse my fibre and saturated fat intake leading up to each of my 19 blood test results. When I combined the two using the ratio of saturated fat to fibre, I found almost a perfect relationship with LDL cholesterol, which was strongest when I looked at my diet for the 21 days before I took the test. My highest LDL cholesterol came when I was eating 30 grams of saturated fat per day, the upper limit for men, and 30 grams of fibre per day, giving me a ratio of 1. For my lowest ever result in April this year, my saturated fat was down at 20 grams per day and my fibre was up at 66 grams per day, giving me a ratio of 0.3. I should note that I built up my fibre intake steadily over 3 years because any sharp increase in fibre may lead to stomach problems. I will also say that I eat over 3,000 calories a day, so for the average person it might look more like 12 to 14 grams of saturated fat and 40 grams of fibre, bearing in mind the average UK intake is only 20 grams of fibre per day. The same relationship can be found in the research. This meta-analysis found that for every additional gram of soluble fibre, your LDL cholesterol lowers by 0.057 millimoles per litre, meaning 10 grams of soluble fibre might lower it by 0.6 millimoles per litre or 20 milligrams per deciliter. Now that it's clear which part of your diet matters the most, I want to finish with some of the changes I made to bring my LDL cholesterol into the optimal range, which hopefully some of you can apply at home. There's a huge amount of friction around food logging and calorie tracking, but I think it's incredibly valuable even to do 1 day of eating. And for this at least, you only need to focus on 2 nutrients, fibre and saturated fat. As mentioned earlier, high saturated fat sources include fattier cuts of meat and full fat dairy, while your fibre comes from fruits, vegetables, grains, beans and legumes. While I didn't follow a specific cholesterol-lowering diet plan, my food choices generally align with popular diets like the Portfolio diet and the advice given by the American Heart Association, where the goal is to reduce the saturated fat from meat and dairy and increase fibre-rich foods. So when my cholesterol was at its peak, my average day's fibre was coming from oatmeal, bread, protein shakes made with banana, and a square of dark chocolate, which I ate almost every day. The other foods ranged from twice a week to once every other week, and these 10 foods contributed 25 of the 34 grams of daily fibre across 2022. You might expect my saturated fat list to contain pizza, burgers, chocolate and ice cream, and while I did eat these foods and they do contain large amounts of saturated fat, they were infrequent enough that across a whole year they weren't even in the top 10. Instead, it's quite a surprising list. Dark chocolate and oatmeal appear again, and twice a week servings of eggs and mackerel, featuring among the more expected foods like milk, butter and ground beef. By 2025, my fibre intake was still predominantly oatmeal, which I've gone back to as a breakfast staple, with the goal of having both lentils and chickpeas once a week. There is also a third recipe of red cabbage salad with grated carrot, raisins and sunflower seeds. 2 of these foods combine to make my favourite high fibre snack. Peanut butter and chopped apple has more than 5 grams of fibre per serving, despite it also containing some saturated fat. My saturated fat list feels pretty optimised. Remember that lowering LDL cholesterol is just one of many health goals supported by food, and if you were to focus on a higher fibre intake, it's associated with other health benefits like reducing the risk of type 2 diabetes and certain cancers. So to wrap this up, if you're looking to reduce your LDL cholesterol, be aware of the fibre and saturated fat content of the foods that are a regular part of your diet. Go and read the food labels in your cupboard, focusing on your everyday foods as well as those in the categories mentioned earlier, or better yet, log your food for a few days so you understand your own personal baseline. From there, try to introduce fibre through snacks like nuts and raisins, apple and peanut butter, and weekly recipes like red cabbage salad, chickpea fritters, and spiced lentils. At the same time, reduce the frequency of fattier cuts of meat like burgers and sausages, dishes heavy on full-fat dairy like pizza and curry, and consider reducing the fat content of everyday foods like milk and yogurt. My own data showed a near perfect relationship between the ratio of saturated fat and fibre in my diet for the 3 weeks before my blood test and my LDL cholesterol results. While you won't see overnight changes in your blood work, previous studies have shown significant reductions in LDL cholesterol after only 8 weeks following a cholesterol-lowering diet. Thanks for watching.